Well, welcome to the show. So let's. I was looking at SDRC's website, which on your website is actually not listed as one of the places that you guys distribute to. But I was on SDRC a couple weeks ago, and I was just perusing through, and I saw the HVGC, and I'm like, what? Like, no way. Because I remember on Instagram, I was in the Helmand Valley Gun Club page, and we'd always hashtag SVGC, and then you'd see the MARSOC operator guys always putting HVGC and all that stuff. And I'm like, there's no way that's a coincidence that's something completely. And I zoomed in and I saw the Southern Cross on the cannabis leaf, and I'm like, dude, that's got to be a Marine. So that's why I looked your guys' website up and everything. And I was like, all right, I got to reach out to these guys and have them on the podcast and see what this is all about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the new website will have all that updated, so we'll have all the stores and all that good stuff. So that website's definitely dated for sure.
Oh, it looks great, man. It looks like you guys are all over the place as well.
We're getting there. We're pushing hard. So
yeah. I want to talk. I do want to get into more about cannabis is such a crazy business right now because it's becoming legalized medically and recreationally in so many places. Some places, like my old state of Indiana, are holding out where they don't want to do it at all, which is kind of ridiculous. But I do want to get into all that. But to get to that point, I want to get to your career and kind of how you even got there. So you were in the United States Marine Corps. What gave you the drive or the decision to join the Marine Corps?
Well, it kind of goes back to when I was in high school and I was playing for a team in southeastern Pennsylvania called Central Bucks West High School, and it was a big-time program. Usually we're nationally ranked, and we were playing in the Eastern Finals in Hershey Park Arena, or Stadium, and the opposing team's coach was a former coach of the Naval Academy, so I had a pretty good game, and next thing I know, I started getting letters from the Naval Academy, and my dad was like, oh boy, he was like getting really excited about it. And I just started thinking, like, well, I really have no desire to join the military. Like, I want to go to college, drink some beer, play some ball, maybe go to class if I have time. Yeah. And then when 9/11 happened, that's when I decided it was time for me to go earn my citizenship. So I finished out the season, and then I was looking to go to the Naval Academy, but they're like, you're going to have to start over as a freshman, which I thought I was going to miss the war, stupid me. Yeah. And I looked at Villanova University, and that was kind of near where I lived, and had a really good reputation for Marine and Navy officers. So transferred there, and originally I wanted to be a naval pilot. And there was a gunnery sergeant there who was a Force Recon Marine. He was a Recon baby, he spent his entire career in the Marine Corps and reconnaissance. And we just kind of started talking. It just felt like more of a natural fit. So just kind of went down that road of, let's go into the Marine Corps, and with the goal of being an infantry officer and kind of moving forward from there. And the Marine Corps just felt better. I always tell people, look at commercials where you might see some of the other services where they talk about 4 years of college and all this other benefits you can get if you do your time. In the Marine Corps, it's like you're running across a lava bridge and you're slaying a dragon, then you become a Marine. And it's like, if you have what it takes, you can call yourself a Marine. And that just kind of gave it more of an elite feeling and something I wanted to go after.
Yeah, for sure. It's the branding. The Marine Corps' branding and ability to promote themselves is next to none, and it's been ongoing, and I'm fully with you too. There's so many people that don't join the Marine Corps because they think it's going to be harder, so they go in the Army. And I think just that mentality of you going into it knowing it's the hardest branch, even if you don't go into special operations or something like that, just knowing you're going to go through the hardest branch right there turns away a lot of people. And I think you get a different caliber of person in the Marine Corps, and it's just a different world. I remember being in Kuwait at what's that? I don't remember. Whatever. One of the training places in Kuwait. We're going to go out to the range. We were talking to one of the Apache pilots, and he was like, "Hey, what's your guys' minimum? What's the minimum amount of crunches you guys have to do for your PFT?" And we're all like, I don't know. I asked. It was like me and 3 or 4 other guys, and we're like, I don't know. We're not sure. We know we have to get this many for a perfect score. And he looked over at the other Army guy he was with. He's like, that's what I'm talking about. He's like, none of the Marines know the minimum fucking score. He's like, all of our guys know the minimum that they need to get, and that's what they're striving for. And I was like, that's crazy. And I was like, that's weird. No one's ever asked me what the minimum amount of crunches you can get, because I've never even heard that. But it's just a mentality thing,
100%. It really is, and it's like you strive for perfection in the Marine Corps. And I tell everyone I'm like we're fanatical for a reason. I mean, my dad was in the Army, and I joke around. I'll say like, "Oh, hey, happy birthday." He goes, "Oh, my birthday's in November." I'm like, "No, it's the birthday of the Army." And he's like, "Oh," and obviously we all know 10 November 1775 Ton Tavern like that.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
just different, and the rest of the history as well. So that's what I think makes the Marine Corps very special.
My dad was in the Army also and was bummed that I joined the Marine Corps. Did your dad have any opinion on that?
No, he loved the fact that I went to Marine Corps. I think he was almost not like envious, but he was just like he loved the esprit de corps and just how the Marines were just different. And I think he was just very stoked. I think he just really enjoyed like kind of the whole culture of the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm. What year did you end up going to OCS?
OCS would have been 2004. I went to OCS that summer.
Okay. And for those that don't know, going into the Marine Corps as an officer, you don't get to pick your job. You're a ground option, you're an air option, or maybe you have a legal contract. There's very few. I think only legal, like JAG officers and pilots are the only ones that can get a guaranteed contract.
Yep.
Everybody else is up to the needs of the Marine Corps. Did that concern you when you were going to OCS and then follow on into TBS?
Yeah, with OCS, it was more or less. I tell everyone like the thing. If you look at boot camp versus OCS, boot camp they're there to make you into a Marine. OCS is a tryout, and they're very clear about that to see if you have what it takes to lead Marine. So they're not really there to like kind of build you up. So kind of my mentality was at first it was really like it was cutthroat in OCS. It was kind of just like everyone kind of looking out for themselves a little bit. It was a weird environment. But then as we kind of went along and grew and you kind of started forming bonds with guys, it was a little bit better. But for me, it was just get through OCS. Now, unfortunately, during that, when I was driving down to Quantico, I started feeling like my neck was like stiffening up. So I'm going through processing, and it's like I think I was in there like mid-July, and I graduated like mid-August type of thing. And I'm like, oh man, maybe I'm just stressed out, and kind of stand there during in processing, and people are like falling over and just like anxiety attacks and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of my body's just feeling weird. And then like throughout like working outs and everything, I mean, I could run a 3 mile like at 19 minutes and not really think about it. And my 3 mile runs were coming at like 21 minutes, and I'm just like gassed. And next thing you know, I'm getting like nosebleeds, and I'm just hawking up a ton of like mucus. And I mean, it was bad, and I just kept going. And they actually tested me for mono, and they're like, no, you don't have it, and just kind of keep going. And by the time I was like getting ready to graduate, at this point we're just doing like our rehearsing on the parade deck and everything. The corpsman's like, hey, you're on light duty, just and I'm like, no, I gotta get out there. And he's like, just shut up, like you made it, just you gotta sit down. He's like, your one lung is completely like blacked out right now.
Oh man.
And so I was coaching high school football, so I come back, I'm coaching a scrimmage in Pennsylvania, a lot of humidity, like 100% humidity, 90 degrees, and I'm shivering on the sideline. And so I stayed home all weekend. My parents Sunday took me to the hospital, and it turned out I had the mono and pneumonia.
Oh man. And
what were you going like? What have you been doing the past like while? I'm like, well, I just went through Marine OCS, and they're like, have you had any drinks or anything? I'm like, oh yeah, I drank like a fish when I got back with my friends, and they're like, you have liver spots on your kidney, like you can't drink, you can't do anything. So I was basically down for a month, but it just had the mindset like I could not fail, and I had to get through that, as crappy as I felt. But that was just kind of that just made OCS that much more memorable. I'll say that much.
Memorable is probably a word to use, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's insane. I had a buddy who was going through pre-dive and then found out afterwards that he had pneumonia, and that he was going through all that with pneumonia. And he was the same way. He was like, why am I struggling on these things that I can normally do okay? And I don't know, man. That's shout out to you, man, for making it through that. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know, the way they kind of train you, and I think the mindset we all have going in there. I mean, I just, I know this is going to sound cocky to other people. I just think people who join the Marine Corps have a mindset of like, I will not fail, and I'll accomplish a mission. I just think it's kind of engraved in us somewhere, and I think the Marine Corps just brings us out. And, of course, a lot of my, like I said, I played for an outstanding high school program where, I mean, we outworked teams. I mean, my coach wasn't the most winningest high school football coach in Pennsylvania for a reason. Like, it wasn't by luck. I mean, we just trained our asses off. And funny with him was, he was telling me, his name was Mike Pettin, so really big name guy, and it's actually his son coaches in the NFL. But he loved the Marine Corps, and he almost like trained us like Marines. And what happened was, he was telling me a story like why he never went to the next level up at college. He's like, to be a good recruiter in college, you got to lie to kids. And he's like, and I just couldn't do that. And he's like, what happened to him was he accepted a full scholarship to Penn State for football. And he's like, it wasn't back then in the days where you had like the national letter of intent days and all the hoopla. He's like, you said, hey, I'm coming. And next thing you know, they send you a letter and you sign it. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So he's like, I give my verbal commitment to Penn State, and I tell all the other schools, like, I'm good, I'm going to Penn State. And he's like, now it's like end of April, early May. I still don't have a letter from them. And I called them up, and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, hey, we went in a different direction. So he doesn't have a scholarship. All the other schools that wanted to give him a scholarship have moved on from him, and they're all tapped out. Well, his high school coach was in the Marines in World War II. And the head coach at Villanova, they served in the same platoon. So he called him up and said, hey, listen, I got this great player, kind of explained the situation. He's like, I can get him on, I can help out with some money, but I don't have a lot of scholarship money right now, but we'll see how it goes. And obviously my coach performed well and got full scholarship. But he's like, it's like basically two Marines kind of saved this like young kid's life where he didn't really know like what direction, like, can I even go to college? So he always had an affinity for the Marine Corps. So, things like that, like how proud he was when I told him I wanted to become a Marine officer, things like that kind of stick in the back of your head, like, my leg could have been hanging off and I'm still going to keep going until someone pulls me out type of deal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think you definitely have that kind of mentality, joining the Marines and going through boot camp or OCS and stuff like that. And then on top of the will to not, I don't want to quit, I want to make it through this or whatever for yourself or whatever, you also, once you start bonding with your platoon mates and stuff like that, you don't want to fail anybody. You don't want to be the guy that's doing the worst. You don't want to be, you never want to be the weight that's dragging everybody down. And I think that kind of motivation drives us to even the next level, of being good at what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% right. And, that's what I really too enjoyed about the Marine Corps. I mean, it was funny at OCS, like one point, we're right by the parade deck, and I don't know if you've been down the Quantico OCS area, but then you have like the obstacle course right there. And when you see like civilians and like military gear, they just look different, right? Like the helmets are crooked and their battle rattle is a little bit bigger. And I looked over and I eventually I just kind of said, and it was during PT, and one of the PT instructors was like, they were tough, but they were kind of cool with you too. Like they had a little conversation. I'm like, it's like, gunnery sergeant, who is that over there? And they're like, oh, that's Wharton School of Business. Like University of Pennsylvania sends their fellows down there to go through a week of OCS because they're like, they just said the leadership that the Marine Corps teaches you can't replicate. And especially like the leadership reaction course that we all go through, which I tell people, I'm like, there's all these checks in the boxes like the instructors are going through where it's like, did you adapt and overcome? Did you kind of lead well? Did you follow well? Did you do this? Did you plan? Did you not quit? But the one thing that they don't care about is, did you complete it? Because these things are impossible. Like you're taking a rope and thrown over water, and if you hit that thing, you just touch a landmine and all this stuff, where it's almost an impossible thing.
Yeah.
But they just want to see how you can delegate, how you can move around, how you can like not let like failure affect you and all that stuff. And I just found that to be like just an outstanding course. And clearly you got a school like, Wharton School of Business saying, yeah, we got to send our people down there so they can learn some leadership. I just thought it was a really great blessing to have that opportunity.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So you obviously have been around elite people that are above and beyond, officers and enlisted. And a question I've been recently posing guys that were officers or are officers is, do you believe in 2021 with the crazy amount of information available to everybody via even just your cell phone, is there a reason that we still require a college degree for someone to go and become an officer? Like, do you believe there is a reason, or why, if we should keep that?
I always told my guys, and a lot of my guys, especially when I was with the Raiders, I mean, a lot of guys had their college degrees and everything. They're going out now, they all have masters, and some of them are doctorates, I just say that's like, listen, for me, a college degree doesn't mean I'm any better of a person than you. It's just a key that opens up some more doors. And even the Marine Corps, they do things that the Army, Navy, or Air Force do not require. Like you have to have a minimum 1,000 on your SAT. The other branches don't care about that. So for me, here I am, total meathead in high school. Like I take the SAT one time, and I passed the clearinghouse, and I'm like, I think I had like an 8 something. And I'm like, whatever, I don't care. Well, now here I am, like a junior at Villanova, and they're like, I got in as a naval officer. Then I'm like, well, I want to become a Marine officer, and they're like, you need to go get 1,000 on your SATs. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I'm like doing the Billy Madison thing where I went to Sylvan Learning Center, and I'm there with a bunch of 14-year-olds, and there's me, and they're like, "Can you buy us cigarettes?" type of deal. Like I'm just that old guy, and I had to learn how to take the SAT, and I basically sat down with the instructor. I'm like, "I need to get 1,000." I'm like, "Just teach me what to do," and she was great. She's like, "Here, like a 30 block question." She goes, "Your first 10 are gonna be green, 11 through 20 are gonna be yellow, 21 through 30 are gonna be red." She goes, "Where you are right now, answer 1 through 15 and put your pencil down." And I'll just do that. And sometimes I was just sitting there for an hour not doing anything, and I walked out with like an 1100 SAT, just because I learned how to do it. But that was just something the Marine Corps wanted. So I'm kind of sitting there like, hey, there just might be different things they want you to kind of like achieve to go over to checking a box or something like that. Maybe it's time management. I don't know. But I'm still good with going to college to be an officer. But I think there's a good argument too. Look at World War II, where enlisted were getting battlefield commission, and they were doing just fine. So I could go. This is such like a political question, a PC way. I could go either way, to be honest with you. Because I mean, I've found some officers where I'm like, what the hell? And I've been around some enlisted guys where I'm like, dude, you should be leading people like on the officer. Like you're making more sense to me than the operations officer is, type of thing. So yeah, it could go either way. But what are your thoughts?
I mean, if anything, I think certain jobs maybe should require, like if I want to be a pilot, then I should probably have a STEM degree so I can at least understand how these things work and stuff like that. But just for your everyday, like I don't know, why does an infantryman or infantry officer need to go and learn the classics? You know what I'm saying? And the crazy thing is it doesn't matter what degree you get. You can get a degree in anything from anywhere. As long as it's a 4-year accredited degree.
Yeah, we'll check in the box. Like I said, that little key that opens that door.
If it was something like, hey, man, we need you to have a degree because, hey, tanks are kind of complex and I'd like you to understand how the tank works, so I'd like you to have like a STEM degree. I could see that, I guess, but having it open to where I could go get a degree in political science or well, I guess that would maybe even be okay, I guess. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just so much bullshit out there.
It's a great question. I mean, I really have never thought about it, but I mean, you're like probably the first one to ask that, so it's thought provocative. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, I can see why not either. So I'm with you.
I like the idea of bringing up enlisted guys to the officer ranks and maybe requiring some college just to get clean up their grammar, spelling, punctuation, or give them kind of STEM classes. But I don't need to send a guy off to MECEP to go learn about some bullshit, some kind of like literature course or something like that. No offense to my literature people out there, but but you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Yeah. It's just, it's something I thought about a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start asking like the officers that come on the show that question, because you guys are the ones that would really fully understand what it means to go through OCS and then TBS and then step in front of a group of people and lead them right off the bat.
Yeah, but we do need our English majors because they always volunteer to be the scribes. So God bless them. Like, it's like I always love when they would come out like, who's an English major? And like 2 people would raise their hands like, you're with me. And I'm like, ooh, bad move.
Man,
this is good. Yeah.
So when you finished TBS, you go back to did you go back to school and then come back for OCS and TBS?
Yes, I did summer OCS. So I did what for ROTC it's called like Bulldog. So it's kind of like the condensed. It's like I think a 6 or 8 week one.
Okay.
And then you also have other options where you can do platoon leader course, which is like 2 summers, and I think you do like 8 weeks apiece.
Yep.
And the Naval Academy doesn't have to go. So it was kind of funny with us. Like we are just like going. I mean, we are nonstop flying around the place. And then you see the PLC guys, and they're kind of like, I don't know, they're going like field trips and stuff like that. It was just kind of bizarre to me. But yeah, so anyway, I get through that. I got mono. I go back to Villanova. It's again, like I didn't know I had mono at the time. I remember I went to go run during PT, and I'm like falling out on a 3-mile run. And here I am, a guy who just graduated OCS, and it was like just so embarrassing.
Yeah.
But since I transferred from UMass to Villanova, one of the like most demoralizing things you go through is you go meet with your counselor, and they're like, "Oh, that class doesn't count. That class doesn't count." And you just think of all the hours you spent on that class. I mean, I guess, hey, lifelong learner, I'm better for it. But so I had to kind of really speed up and make up some classes. So graduated in December, and right as soon as I graduated, they commissioned me. And then I just kind of hung out with the assistant Marine officer instructor, which is a great guy named Gunnery Sergeant Don Muller, like a sonny who's a Recon baby. Helped out as much as I could, and then I believe I got orders down to Quantico in April of 2005, and that's when I started going through schooling.
Were you concerned about where you went for schooling for TBS or went for the
Yeah,
school?
yeah.
Okay, so were you when you went before when you were at TBS? Were you concerned about not getting an infantry contract? Like how much was that in your mind? Like shit, I need to set myself up to like be able to choose my job.
Yeah, you're right. It was definitely kind of something you're like, oh man, like you're right. It's like we kind of go in there, unless you're a lawyer or a pilot, it's kind of a free for all at that point. And the nice thing is having a guy like Gunny Moeller train us. I mean, it was like amphibious reconnaissance school. I mean, we were working out 5 days a week. He was thrashing us in the pool. I mean, we were all ripped. And I think Villanova had like the best PFT rating of all the colleges in America. Like, I mean, and then he would just take us out and do field ops and was just doing like advanced stuff with us. So,
Yeah,
kind of nice. Like, they're like, hey, were you prior enlisted when I was kind of going through some stuff? And I'm like, no, I just kind of had Gunny Moeller teach me how to do some things. So I felt confident there where I understood navigation, how to kind of move through the tree line and do the formations and kind of, get onto the objective and do some outside the box thinking. And I just kind of felt confident, but I'm definitely a guy, like if I want something, you're going to know it.
mm-hmm.
And my platoon commander, who was the captain, he knew how bad I wanted. I was like, tell him all the time when we're sitting down counseling. And the night they're giving out the our MOSs, he'd like everyone's like 0302 and like this guy 0302. Then they're like Buckley, like 8224 Zulu Foxtrot. And I'm like, what? And he's just like he starts laughing. He goes 0302, and he's like, you made it, and like kind of thing. So that was great. But we also too at that point, like the Marine Corps was kind of ballooning up. I mean, we were fighting both Iraq and Afghanistan were really intense, and I was. Even got orders to 1st Battalion, 9th Marines that wasn't even activated since Vietnam. Luckily, nothing against 1-9, amazing story, The Walking Dead, but they didn't deploy for like 3 years. I was sent over to the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, and was able to go after infantry officer course. But, TBS, I loved it. It was a really good time. I had a really good instructor staff. I was put in leadership roles. It was a good deal. A lot of great guys. As soon as Friday Libo call went up, I mean, we bombed up to DC and we all just lived in a hotel room for the weekend. And it was just a really good time. I mean, it was like I heard horror stories about TBS, but I really felt it was like a very beneficial thing and just amazing at how much, I guess you can't see it yourself, but when I went back to Villanova and I'm helping them out with a field exercise, I'm just kind of rambling things out, and Gunny Moeller comes up to me. He's like, "Your knowledge has just gone like tenfold." He's like, even everyone like the majors looking at you kind of for like answers and stuff like that, just because of how well they're instructing you. So I love how the Marine Corps does it. I think every other branch should do it because you're young and impressionable as a second lieutenant, right? So it might not be beneficial that we go to Ranger School and we're trying to act like a sergeant or a specialist or something like that because they're like our peers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's good to kind of isolate and just let them kind of do our things and kind of get out of there. And to kind of caveat on that, my platoon sergeant at 2nd Recon Battalion, retired as Master Gunnery Sergeant Kenny Urquhart, like dear friend of mine, he was a Ranger instructor. And I'm like, hey, so what's the difference between a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps and a second lieutenant in the Army? He goes, well, both don't really know what they're doing, but at least the Marine knows he's in charge. And that was, I attribute that all to TBS. Like they teach you guys to be leaders, like what you guys are expected to do, like not to follow and all that stuff. So, I think it's a really good program we have.
How did So first off, when you were there a lot of guys going in trying to become infantry officers at the time? Because this is what 05, 06 time frame, so Iraq is really on fire. A lot of people are getting fucked up over there and stuff like that. So was that still like a big, hey, I want to go into the infantry?
Yeah, everyone wanted to go to the infantry, including the females that were in our company. I was in an all-male platoon, but there was some cross-pollination platoons. But, I think like we were like in the classroom for like 3 weeks, and then we do our first field exercise. It's like a 2-week exercise out in the tree line in Quantico, and it's like you're pretty much in a defense for a majority of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, now you're looking at it, it's like June or whatever in Quantico, and you got the humidity and you're sweating and it's just, all that stuff. By the time we got out of that field exercise, like half the people who want to be in the infantry didn't want to do it anymore. They're like, no way. Like, I can't do that. So you kind of like, it really weeded people out quickly. And the groups of guys who wanted to be infantry, we all kind of like gravitate to each other for the most part.
Yeah.
And and like I said, better or worse, they needed a lot of infantry officers. So a lot of us, I don't think anyone got any broken hearts. I think they're actually kind of recruited a couple of guys over to become an infantry officer. I
Really?
mean, my infantry officer, oh yeah, my IOC course, infantry officer course down in Quantico, I mean, we were like a 52, 54 person class, which is huge. So they literally had like 2 platoons where usually it's like a 25-person course.
Mm-hmm.
But they were just, we were expanding. So they needed infantry officers badly.
How was IOC for you? A lot of people say those first, you do those first assessments and stuff like that, and that's a real breaker. Obviously, a lot of female Marine officers that have tried have had, a hard time with it, and a lot of it is because of what's that first? I totally forgot the name of like the first thing that you guys do, or one of the first things you do. That
The
physical
IOC
assessment.
Yeah, but it's basically the IOC INDOC they do.
Can you talk about that and why, a lot of people have, because a lot of good people don't make it through that, right?
Yeah, no, it's I'm gonna be vague because one thing that did happen while I was at TBS was that book called One Bullet Away came out.
I have it up on my shelf.
Yeah, and he basically spilled the beans on IOC, and I'm not saying anything negative about the author. It did annoy some of the instructors at IOC, and they basically said, "Hey, if you're going to write your book about yourself, don't do it at this age, and don't say things that we like to use in our course. That's going to better help you because they want to make everything very ambiguous and get you very comfortable of operating in the fog of war."
Mm-hmm.
So this whole thing was. They had us out and they just basically bust us out in the middle of the night and we have to start doing land nav. And you're just kind of rocking and rolling and they do a couple things to you out there. And it's just to kind of challenge you. I remember, coming around at one point and we had to go through the obstacle course and they said you can take your ruck off, but it will add like, I don't know, a minute to your score. And they had the whole field surrounded with psyops and they were playing Johnny Cash is Hurt. And I just remember like going, I see someone climb up the rope and they just fall, bust their ankle, they're done. And, me being an idiot, like I'm going to keep my ruck on me and all that stuff and kind of go through. And I made all the way through. But I'm like, if I would drop my ruck, I probably would have saved, even though it penalized me a minute, I probably would have saved like 3 minutes. And I'll never forget like going across the field and I had to go cross an LZ to the next station. And the LZ just had like all bumps and crap like that.
Yeah.
And I started cramping so bad just trying to walk there. And then one of our instructors was like a 2-time All-American college wrestler, so you had to wrestle him, which that wasn't a lot of fun at that point.
No.
And we were just throwing tons and tons. I mean, it was like put these weapons together, set up that explosive, do this. I mean, and they taught us everything beforehand, but it was just a big gut check. And, getting through that was really rough. But, you kind of have to pay the piper. And, the captains there, like the IOC was probably the best course I ever went through. The captains there were all, war heroes. They all been there. Everyone's kind of looking at them. The guy who was my mentor was a gentleman. He retired as a Major Bryan Shantosh, but as a captain, actually as a first lieutenant, he got like the first Navy Cross since Vietnam when he did some heroics during the push through Iraq, and then. He was in the Battle of Fallujah with 3-5, and they frocked him to be a captain, and he was a company commander during that whole thing, and just, was just a complete animal, but also an amazing guy because he like sat me down and he's like, listen, I need to kind of, he's like, I need to unfuck you guys, and he's like, right now, like you guys see captains, you guys probably get all nervous and all that stuff. He's like, I'm the company commander. You guys are gonna be my platoon commanders. I need to hear what you guys have on your mind. If I'm not saying something that makes sense or you disagree. That's why I have you guys. And he's like, so like, don't be nervous around captains. And he just kind of taught us that kind of rapport between a company commander and a second lieutenant. But yeah, in terms of that INDOC thing, yeah, it was a ball buster, man. Like I said, like, I did the Recon stuff, I did the MARSOC stuff, and I'll say that one day INDOC is definitely up there as well.
How many people, or what do you know, like the numbers, like what percentage don't make it through IOC, like traditionally?
It's not really a low attrition rate.
No.
For the most, I mean, you might drop like 4 or 5 people here and there. Some might be injuries. Some might just be they just don't have it and they're not meant to be. Nothing was watered down. Like they're like, hey, we just need numbers. We got to get people out there. But the crew I had, everyone there, like the nice thing is for the majority of us, I mean, 99%, we all wanted to be in that course. So again, it's like that mindset, like, I don't care. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get through this thing and just make it happen.
Yeah, and they've had time to weed a lot of people out by that point. It's crazy. You said a lot of people said they didn't want to do it after going to the field. Man, I love going to the field. Like that was like the best thing. I would much rather be in the field doing stuff out there than back in the office. You know, like it's like
It's simple, right? It's peaceful. It's like you don't have a cell phone. You're not gonna have like credit card people calling you, whatever. It's just like that's why I tell you people about combat. I'm like, I know it's hectic and it's chaotic and it's violent and all that, but I was like, you literally your world's so small at that point. You're just focused on the mission. That's all you got. Like all the other things, you can think about all you want. You can't do anything about it. So just do what you're doing out there and be great at it.
for sure. So you've done something that thousands and thousands and thousands of officers have done, which is check into your first unit and step in front of your guys for the first time. Like, what's that feeling like when you're showing up and you're like, oh, fuck, I'm second lieutenant schmuck, and I'm here to, I don't know anything.
Yeah. For me with that, like again, like everything we did at IOC, I felt so prepared walking out of there. I
Yeah.
mean, I wish I could tell you some of the things they did to us because it truly was like the fog of war, and they really, I don't want to say like messed with us, but they did. I mean, it was like you didn't know scenarios you're going into, and you had to kind of think your way through it. I mean, the amount of ammo and everything we used out there, I mean, we were like whipping it on. And I mean, we were at 29 Palms for about 2 weeks for our final exercise. Then we flew up to Bridgeport and we do that for a little while. And I mean, the amount of ammo we're using and just combined air, like you knew you can do all that stuff that is required of a Marine Corps officer. And I just felt very good walking out of there. And, for me, I was always been lucky, I suppose, because I've always been kind of leadership roles as captains and everything. And, when I checked in, I meet my lieutenant colonel. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth DeTrue. I'm a guy from outside Philly. He's a Philly guy. So we bonded right away. I mean, we both love sports, and it was just kind of like, man, this is great.
Yeah.
And then during what I understand, it was like the company commanders did a draft pick. And, I had a pretty good showing at IOC. So I was I guess I was like the first guy picked by this guy named Captain Gus Mingus. Now, what was very beneficial about that is Gus was on his like 19th year in the Marine Corps. So he was a Force Recon Marine. He was a scout sniper, drill instructor, and then he went the officer route. And it was just like a perfect scenario where he could kind of teach you like what the enlisted guys were going through and being an officer. And it was just, I just felt like, man, I could not pick a better unit to check into. And I'll be honest with you, as weak as this may sound, 2-8 was put on the MEU during the invasion, so they didn't do the invasion. So a lot of people there, as the enlisted side, haven't seen combat as well. So it's not like you go into a unit where you're 3-5 in the heart of like Fallujah, one of the biggest battles of all time, and like you get like second lieutenant shows up like, hey, I'm here to lead you. That could have been really intimidating. So I didn't have to face something like that.
Yeah.
I basically had all people who've never been in combat as well. So that kind of took some pressure. I mean, there was like maybe a handful of guys in the platoon who were. But I had to check in. It was kind of a little disappointing when I got my assignment because they made me a weapons platoon commander right away, and I wasn't going to be one of the other mobile platoons type of thing. But just kind of knowing what we were doing in counterinsurgency, they made the weapons platoon into basically fourth platoon, and we were just like another infantry platoon. So I was able to go out and lead and do all that stuff. And I think one of the best advice I received from Brian Chantosh was like, don't check in and say, you guys should trust me. He's like, they're just going to look at you. He's like,
yeah, just
be like, hey, I'm here. Like, I know some things, but I'm going to learn from you guys, and in time, I'm going to gain your trust. And he's like, I don't know what it's going to be or how it's going to happen, but there's going to be a moment you're going to be faced with the horns of dilemma, and you're just going to step up, or you're not. And he's like, but once you do that, the guys are going to start trusting you, and you'll just have that natural ability. And things were going well. I mean, our platoon was kind of the bull platoon. I mean, we were like Captain Mingus and I very much saw eye to eye and got along real well. And I think, when we did an exercise at 29 Palms, we were going through Mojave Viper, and we were going through what's that big old range? Like range 400, like a big company one.
The assault range.
So I had to go up on this shelf and do a support by fire. And the coyotes were kind of teaching you what to do, and they were going to sit there and kind of control your fire. Well, when we went up there, I just kind of put all the guys out there, and this is putting my fist out for the maneuver element. And as guys would hit there, I would shut this other guy down and keep walking down the line, and I was controlling the fire, and the coyotes backed away, and I just kind of ran it all, and got a really good debrief afterwards where they're like, we've never seen that before. I mean, we didn't have to do anything. My battalion commander was like jumping up and down on me, and you just saw the guys just get a big smile on their face because they were like, not me, they were getting praised for what they did, but they just, I remember they kind of looked at me like, okay, like we all got this, and it was just kind of a good thing. But yeah, I don't know if I answered the question really well there. Like,
No, totally great.
I can't really like standing in front of them. I just we kind of went at it, and then I just took him to PT, and I just kind of ran him pretty hard.
Just go to work, run them to death. If you can't do anything else, run them to death.
Exactly.
That's funny. So at what point did you deploy with 2-8 at all?
Yeah, so we it was my infantry officer course. We graduated like I don't know, December 15th, let's just say, and we weren't supposed to check into our units until I think we were supposed to get 30-day leave until January 15th. And then they're like, hey, 2-8 guys, you're going to have to check in early because your guys' workup starts like January 4th. Like, you guys are in full out, like school time's over and all that stuff. So I remember I drove down to Lejeune. And I got to tell you a funny story about an IOC thing, but go down to Lejeune. I find a house within like 48 hours, and I put a bid on a house and get it, and then I just went back up to Pennsylvania, and then came down. We watched, like, my friends and I watched the national championship game together, and then we checked in the next day. But one thing I got to tell you, I'm sorry this is getting choppy.
No, you're good.
So General Mattis was down at Quantico while we were going through. He was a 3-star. And, TBS, he would come and talk to us, but during IOC, he loved us. Like, for example, the Marine Corps birthday, we're on the mortar range. He comes out with beer and steaks. And he's like, cool. I can be up in D.C., but why would I want to be there? I want to be with the guys. And, having a beer with him out in the range, and I'm just like, which probably is illegal, but I'm having a conversation. I'm like, and he's telling me about getting in fights, and he got in some big bar fight up in Canada. And I don't know if that fight happened like 2 weeks ago or like 20 years ago, the way he was kind of describing it. But he just loved us and thought the world of us and was just a great guy to have around. So one day we're in the classroom, and our classroom was like a stadium seating. And we get our orders, and we were just an East Coast heavy class. Like, I think there was like 10 guys that were sending out to Pendleton, but they were prior enlisted and they had families out there. So it's natural you would just put them out there, right? So this one prior enlisted Marine is having a meltdown. Like, he's freaking out. He's like, I can't go to Lejeune, no. And, out in the field, he was kind of bumming cigarettes from some of the enlisted guys and just kind of doing things you probably shouldn't be doing at that point. And the next day, we're just in the classroom, and General Mattis's aides walk in. And you see the captain look at General Mattis's, like, aides, and he's like, what's up? And it's like, just 1 second, I hate to interrupt. He goes, hey, guys, General Mattis is going to walk in, do not stand, doesn't want to be recognized. He goes, Major, sir, he's going to want to have a conversation with you. Now, where I'm sitting, I'm right by the emergency exit door, and I'm, like, right on the aisle. So next thing you know, General Mattis walks up, and the Major's walking down, and they meet right next to me. And so I'm just like, oh. And Major has his book out, like, he's kind of doing the whole thing, like, standing on the yellow footprints. And General Mattis goes, what the fuck is a malfunction here in an infantry officer course? And he's like, sir, I'm not trying. One of your officers is refusing my orders. And he's like, well, he's thinking he would like to go out to California. And he goes, no. He's pretty much telling me to go fuck myself. And he's like, well, I don't think he's saying that, General Mattis. And he's like, no, he is. He's like, matter of fact, he doesn't deserve to be a Marine infantry officer. He's like, get him out of this class. He's dismissed. And he's turned and walked right out that door. And the Major goes down. He goes, you are dismissed from infantry officer course. We'll figure something out. And he had to go do a different career path.
Oh, my God, dude.
I remember sitting there thinking, like, General Mattis could tell me my duty station is Alaska and the uniform of the day is a bikini. And I was like, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, it was a straight up God gun came down, like, and, like, disappeared.
Dang,
so
man.
I had to tell you that story.
No, that's crazy. That guy is probably like, fuck, I shouldn't have been bitching about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, damn.
Well, yeah, it's like when I get, like, a good friend of mine, he retired after, and he was like a fantastic Marine officer, and he would have been a full bird colonel if he felt like it. But they wanted to put him in different places, and he goes, when you start questioning orders, it's probably time for you to get out of the Marine Corps. It's like
Yeah.
it's just what we're supposed to do. They want us to go somewhere, we go. We shouldn't really like bitch and moan about it. And it's very. I saw it live and in action when a guy bitched and moaned. Okay, you're out of here.
Especially as a second lieutenant. That's like a lance corporal bitching. Like, no one cares, man. Just go do
Yeah,
what you're supposed to do. Like, nobody
exactly.
gives a fuck.
I mean, I was just like, dude, we're infantry officers. I'm like badass. I mean, we just like that's a major hurdle for us. So, yeah, that was crazy. But yeah, back to 2-8. Yeah, so we checked in, and then we just had to kind of get right after it because we were getting ready to go to a Fallujah, Iraq in about 6 months or 7 months, something like that.
How did the workup look for you guys? You said you did an EMV and stuff like that. Can you talk about, I mean, a lot of units start small and build up, to like bigger exercises and, build up to an EMV and stuff. Can you kind of tell us, like, break down a little bit some of the more basic training and kind of how you guys built up to make sure everybody was ready to go for the more advanced training at EMV?
Yeah, with Gus Mingus, I mean, he again his background being a force recon guy, sniper. I mean, he was really an outside the box guy. So the first field op we did was a reverse cycle op. So we were just operating at nighttime and down during the day, and it was fine. It was kind of more of like us kind of getting to know our platoon. So I more or less kind of went into it. Like the platoon sergeant was okay, but I'm like I'm gonna kind of lead like I need to, but I also want to kind of like take a step back and observe
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's really. I just don't like when leaders come in and they're like, day one, we're gonna do this, 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 and that. Like,
Yeah.
take a step back for 2 weeks and kind of see what you got and see
Yeah.
like, your job as a leader is to know how to push the right buttons
For sure.
and kind of gain personality. So, we kind of went through that, and then like we did another kind of field exercise as a company, and then Gus just really wanted us to start taking our platoons out on our own because he's like, listen, I'm going to cut the umbilical cord. He's like, we're not ever going to do a company op in Fallujah most likely, or, it might be limited, but you guys are going to know, like he said, you guys one day are going to have to be in firm bases by yourself. You're going to have patrol bases by yourself. You're going to have to do all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had some teeps that we had to hit for the battalion and everything. But, I just kind of did a walk, crawl, run with everyone and just kind of did a crawl, walk, run. Just kind of went out, did a couple ranges with the guys, and then kind of started pushing things a little bit more aggressively. And, to that part, I just tried to get the guys out in the field as much as possible and really work on patrol-based operations, even little things, making sure we understand how to make a platoon operations center and all those things. And it was good. We were given a lot of freedom. And like I said, for me, it was great because Gus had a lot of confidence with me and gave me a pretty good rope to go run with. So we just kind of pushed it. And what I really like to do was I'll sit down with, the platoon sergeant and with the squad leaders. I'd be like, hey, what do you guys want to do? I'm like, plan a field op. And let's just see, you tell me what your deficiencies are and we're going to work on that. And I
Yeah.
really tried to really get to that culture that we're a team.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not just me pushing everything down. I want to get everyone's input and see what we can do. And that really helped me as a leader because I really learned how my squads, where their strengths and their weaknesses were and how to best utilize them.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great thing to do is to allow the more senior enlisted guys within your platoon to take charge and do that thing because the lieutenant's not always going to be there. The captain's not always going to be there. The sergeant is almost always there. You know what I'm saying? And he has to know how to run different kind of operations. And if you never give him that ability to go out and plan and lead, like a training event and stuff like that, going to Iraq is being in Iraq's the worst place for him to. That's the first time he's ever tried something or been in charge
Absolutely.
of something. So that's definitely key.
Yeah, it was great, and we really pushed. I really like satellite patrolling where we would just start splitting up even the squad.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yep.
worked with that fire team leader and stuff. I'm like, we've got to kind of keep changing things up because we're always going to be observed by the enemy. So we're just kind of 12 guys moving around or whatever it is. I'm like, just kind of mess things up and it's going to kind of get in their head. But I'm like, this is kind of big boy stuff.
Yeah.
And it definitely paid dividends as I progressed my career into other units, kind of having that mentality of, letting these guys be leaders that they are, just kind of sit there and, my big thing I always tell them is like, listen, I'm going to give you my left and right lateral limits. Here's my intent. Then I'm going to get the fuck out of the way and let the talent take over and just kind of boys do what the boys got to do. And it's paid well for me.
Yeah, for sure. Were you basing any of your training during your workup on like current intelligence reports? Did you know what you were getting yourself into? Okay.
Yeah. So we would get some good updates. there was, kind of in the middle, what we were looking at doing. We almost did like a takedown of Ramadi, like we did in Fallujah. So we were kind of building up for that. That kind of came later down the line, but I remember at one point they're like, "Hey, we got to start working some tank integration inside a city," and you're like, "Okay." So we were studying a lot of like the Battle of Fallujah and how to best utilize that, and you just kind of start seeing the arrows point that way. But eventually it got called off, and unfortunately, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines was like left there alone, and they had a really rough deployment. I mean, Ramadi was really kind of kicking at that spot. But yeah, the best that we could, we were trying to, get all the basic and fundamentals down, but then we started understanding, we'd be doing patrol-based operations and how to best utilize that. And, it gave us a great foundation, but as you know, being deployed, you kind of have to adapt to the arena you're in. So we kind of had to get into some other stuff. But that was great because, again, having a guy like Gus Mingus, who had such a versatile background and did a lot of great things, and being a sniper and stuff like that, he was letting us do a lot of outside-the-box training or outside-the-box like operations in Iraq that I'm not sure many other company commanders would have allowed.
Yeah, I think a lot of people. It's unfortunate you see some leaders fall into that risk averse. They don't want to. They're looking at their career. You know what I'm saying? And if something bad happens, and it's on them, then that's the end of their career, and that can be, I guess, a good thing sometimes, but a lot of times it's definitely a bad thing when you're kind of holding back because you're worried about something that's going to happen with your career. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
When you guys did deploy, where did you end up going, and can you kind of talk about the situation on the ground at the time?
Yeah, so when we ended up just it had been northwest of Fallujah actual. And 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, we did a RIP TOA, relief in place with them. And they just established a camp or like an OP called OP Viking. So it was kind of north of Route Mobile. And, people remember some of the roads. It was like right on Golden Road, Route Golden, and kind of north of a little cluster area called Sacagawea. So we were at OP Viking. We had one company down in Sacagawea. We had weapons company in an area called Karma, which is just due right north of Fallujah on Route Reds. And we had another company that got pulled out far west to work with LAR. So, when we got there, one, it was just kind of like we were living very Spartan. I mean, this thing had like no power, this like farmhouse that we bought. We were doing a lot of building it up and kind of get that thing going. And it was kind of an untapped place. Like no one really knew who was in the zoo and all that stuff. And we learned some hard lessons. I mean, we're hitting some IEDs. There was a route called those North and South Angels that just went down a canal road that led over to Route Reds. I mean, it's crazy how I can still remember this. That led into Karma. It's like, and we were getting hit by IEDs there. I mean, even on our first patrol, I mean, we took some small arm fire. And then the big thing too we were getting hit by was a lot of indirect fire. And, kind of what we started to learn later on, I mean, about 2 months into it, was they were usually using frozen ice or dry ice. And basically they would put the mortar out, they would have this set up, they'd have the wires. And once that thing melted and the wires touched, the round would come off and hit inside our compound.
Yep.
But we would try to do something like that. They were long gone. So here was the brilliance of Gus Mingus saying, we started talking about different ways of doing this. He allowed me to take basically a couple guys from each platoon to go off and do like our own little mission kind of up there, kind of bebopping around for about 72 hours. And then we just started doing what we were calling hunter-killer missions, where it was a big, basically like, not like, it's like, I would say they're hills of sand. And we would go in and just like kind of do like a connecting file and dig in. And we were able to kind of control that to the point that one day we actually caught the guys as they're coming out. It was like one of those weird moments. You see this like Toyota truck pull up, 2 guys get out, like, out comes the dry ice, and you're like, no way. And you see the mortar tube, you're like, is this really happening? Like, you can't believe watching this. And, sure enough, we just opened up on them. And it was one of the wildest things I ever saw. Like, so one guy, he's running away. He gets laced up in the back of his leg, and he's down. And the other guy was like, he looked like Neo from the Matrix. Like, he was just moving all the way around, and bullets are bouncing everywhere, just not hitting him. It just was not his day. And you see the guy who was shot kind of reach up to him, like, help, help. And the guy turns around, runs back to help him. Well, the guy just ripped off his jean jacket and then kept running. Ugh. And just left the guy there. And I'm like, dude, that is the dirtiest move I ever saw in my life. And,
wow.
Yeah, we called into QRF and kind of directed them where to go, and they picked up the guy and brought him back, and we got him down to Fallujah Medical. Um, but like I said, just having a guy like Gus Mingus with that aggressive mindset, it's like you said, it probably helped. He was coming up on 20 years, and he was done. So he was like, "Hey, we're gonna, we're just go all out." But it just helped us maintain and control the battlefield. And it was we got to do some really interesting things. Like at one point, we did a combined raid with the SEALs, where we had to go hit an objective uh, just north of Karma, and they were simultaneously going to hit the same cell in Fallujah proper in the city, and we're going to meet at the Fallujah train station. And Gus Mingus came out with me on this one, and we go in, and I just remember we go up to the door, and I literally open the door, it just opens, and we're like, all right, so guys just walked in, and you just see all these guys sleeping, and we just all surrounded them, and next thing you know, we're like, all right, give them a little nudge in the stomach, and they all wake up with muzzles in their face, and that was it. And we got them out. We called a lot of guys and brought them down to the Fallujah train station. We're hanging out the SEALs, and they're like, yeah, are you guys like Recon? Or are you guys like, what are you? We're like, no, we're just infantry. They're like, fuck, you guys are Marine Infantry. You guys pulled this shit off. They're like, goddamn Marines. It's like kind of cool stuff like that. So
That's
it was
pretty
like,
wild, sneaking in
yeah.
someone's house like that and just being. That's got to be a weird feeling too when you're like, "Hey, wake up!" You're like, huh?
Yeah, it was like because we're all like geared up, like, oh man, this could be like like we're going, the SEALs are doing something, how you get all
Yeah.
pumped up. Oh man, this could be like crazy. It's gonna be like Delta Force, all the like crazy stuff. And yeah, we just hope they didn't lock the door, so we just opened it and walked in. It's
After you,
like,
after you guys took out at least one of the mortar guys, did that stop your IDF, or did it just kind of delay it for a little bit
it
until they got somebody else
definitely,
out there?
yeah, it definitely limited it. Like they would go in different areas and try to go, but that was kind of their. Because I mean they were in defilade too, because there's a mound right there, so that was an ideal spot. But it definitely slowed it down. But I mean, listen, I think we took like, I don't know, it was like 56 days of indirect fire. Something, it was a
Man,
kind of high number, and a lot of that was in the beginning where it was almost like 20 some days straight, I believe. For whatever reason, they never hit anything critical. I mean, it was crazy how you just kind of get lucky at times. But yeah, it definitely limited it. And, we really kind of had a good presence out there. And then, we kind of had to go in there with a heavy fist to kind of get things figured out. And then towards the end, we really want to start getting to know like the more the human terrain, so that way we could help out the next group that was going to rip with us.
mm-hmm.
So we really kind of took more time to kind of get to know exactly who was, who's in what house, and start kind of marking them properly. And that was thanks to our executive officer. I think he's now a colonel, but Charlie Nash. He was the one like, hey, we probably need to kind of slow it down and really get down to this like counterinsurgency thing on that side. Because we kind of made the presence, we backed off everyone. Now it's time to kind of do the more counterinsurgency operation. And, it worked. It went pretty well. And, we lost. I had one guy shot during that. And, and the other platoons had a couple other casualties. But all in all, I mean, we did pretty well.
Yeah. When you were there, how much interaction did you have with like the local populace, and what was their kind of vibe? They were giving off about you being there.
Yeah, we had a lot of interaction with them. I mean, during patrols, we would typically go and stop in places. I hate the phrase like presence patrol. It's like, hey, they know we're here. Like, let's go actually do some work. So, we understood who the key decision makers were, and we kind of started it's just funny, and this, I just start kind of adapting to the environment, and you can kind of start feeling out what's going on. And, one thing I love about the Marine Corps, you probably have a couple guys in your platoon who might have had some of a colorful lifestyle, if you will, like in their youth and everything. And they'll be like, you know what, we can kind of smell our own. I think that guy's a little bit crooked, stuff like that, where you start picking things out.
Yeah.
But we really had a good working relationship with a lot of people, and we took care of a lot of people, and it was very receptive, because that's the main thing in counterinsurgency. It's all about the human terrain. And we also understood too, these people were just put in a terrible situation.
Yeah.
Sometimes like you might I mean, we caught a kid one time trying to blow us up. Literally we saw the copper wire going across the north. It was from South Angels to North Angels. We're on patrol. We kind of caught the glint. We just kind of peeled back around, and we find a kid in the bush with a clacker. And,
damn.
He's crying, and it's basically, all right, what's going on here? And, his dad comes out all upset, and he's like, basically they said they're going to kill him if he didn't do this. And I'm like, all right. So we would stage, like we were taking him into questioning, but then we wanted to get him to a safe location, just because I knew if we left and nothing happened, they would go there and probably do some terrible things. So we're
Yeah.
always take care of the civilians and just understanding the situation that they were in.
Man, that's a that's one of those like tough like moral decisions, that you have to you come I don't know, that question comes into play, like what do? You just found a kid that just tried to blow you up. He's
Yeah.
just a kid, you
Yeah.
know. In all rights, you could probably smoke the kid and no one would
Yeah.
care on the chain of command because he was trying to kill you.
Yeah.
But is that the right call?
How
That's
many
a
more Al Qaeda would I made? How many more insurgents? So, because that might have, the whole family might have turned on us at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Next time the family's not doing it under threat, the dad would be happy to do it because you just smoked his kid.
100%.
Even though the kid was in the wrong,
Yeah.
but it's hard something, and I'm sure you've dealt with this too. It's hard to talk to people about like what it's like in Afghanistan or Iraq or something like that, because it's like if you've never been there and you've never seen how these people live and their culture and stuff like that, you're just never going to fully understand it. You're never going to understand why a kid would go out and agree to set off an IED, or
Yeah, scared as hell. Just like, oh, like I don't have a choice here. I mean, it was terrible, but that's, like I said, it was kind of like the controlled chaos. I mean, yeah, we're aggressive, we want to do things, but you just got to kind of take a step back and understand the scenario. Now, if like the kid had a gun he's pointing at us, unfortunately, things have to happen.
yeah,
But we neutralized the IED and we just kind of did we flanked around and, obviously this kid had no idea what was going on. And to us, it was more of a shock, like, oh my God, this is a kid. And that's when we really kind of start looking around like, hey, let's understand what these people are going through. I mean, we're here for 7 months. They live here. And this is a
for
really
sure.
terrible situation.
That's the thing that I think people forget too. When we, recently in the news, everyone's talking about the ANA giving up and all this other stuff, and there's multiple reasons for why they gave up their arms and stuff like that, including, there's cowardice obviously, but there's also like, hey, dudes don't have food, dudes don't have ammo, and they're not going to stand up and fight anybody. Well, what was I getting ready to say? I lost my train of thought. I was sitting there talking.
Yeah, the old TBI hole, man. It happens.
Yeah. Yeah, right. But it's, you know what? I totally lost my train of thought of what I was getting my point there. But anyway, when you were there, because the military is a reflection of society, and we have people from all backgrounds and just weird thinkings. And I remember when I first got to the fleet, one of my corporals had two bumper stickers on his car. One said 9/11 was an inside job, and one said politicians like they're peasants unarmed. And I'm like, my platoon sergeant saw that and was like, you take that shit, they made him take it off his car. But that's, you have all kinds of people in the military, even people that disagree with the current military's, like, whatever they're doing. Did you run into that as a leader in your platoon or in your company, where you saw people that didn't even want to go to Iraq, or they thought it was an unjust war and like, I don't want to be there?
Yeah, we did have one incident where we were getting close to getting ready to go to Iraq when I was in 2-8. And like one guy, he was in my platoon and, not exactly the strongest performer. And he just said, basically like, yeah, I don't think I want to go. Like, God's going to decide who wins this, and something of that nature. And I remember I heard General Mattis say it one time, and I thought it sounded pretty cool. And it was like, God's just going to, like, we'll decide who wins this war and who doesn't. Like, God will be there observing, like, it's not like he wants to pick a side and see his children kill each other and stuff like that. So I just said, hey, listen, God's not going to decide. He's just going to observe. It's going to be us on the battlefield who will decide who wins. And next thing you know, I get a congrat written against me. And so that's basically like the Marine's mother called the congressman and wrote this letter. And I come into work one day, and basically we had to tell the entire company to stay in their barracks. And they shut down a day of training for us. And we kind of had to go through everything to kind of like work this out. And just the guy didn't want to go to Iraq. And it was like, hey, too bad. Like, this is what you signed up for. You're a big boy. You knew this was going. And luckily, when we got over there, some of the headquarters units needed some extra Marines. So we sent some of the people who might have been like wavering and stuff like that. We just got them over there with them and let them do the deployment back in the rear, just doing admin stuff, which was the best move we could do. Because, like the morale reasons, you don't want some guy in the middle of a firefight and just saying I shouldn't be here, or just not doing their job, or whatever it may be. Everyone's got to be on the same page, ready to just put, an amazing amount of lethality on the battlefield when it has to happen and accomplish a mission.
Yeah.
Not sit say I shouldn't be here or what were we doing. I mean, it's an all volunteer force.
Yeah, and it kind of blew my mind sometimes when I would run into someone like that. I was a forward observer, and I remember we had a scout come in, and he just got into the fleet. He'd been there for a few months. He was all right. He wasn't anything special, but he wasn't bad. And there came, as forward observers, you never deploy with your unit, with like artillery units. You always attach to whoever. Yep. And we had a deployment coming up, and we're like, hey, man, you're up. Like, you're up to be attached to this, and you're going to Afghanistan or whatever. And he was just totally against it. And I'm like, bro, why did you join the Marine Corps? Why did you join combat arms? Like, there's 2 wars going on right now. Did you not think this was going to happen? Same kind of deal like what you did. We, at the same time, another IA popped up, individual augment position popped up, and they needed someone in Okinawa. And we're like, all right, dude, you're going to Oki, because we got a whole crew of guys here that want to go, because a whole stable of forward observers that are just itching to get out, get away from training and go play the big game, So it's just kind of weird that those guys still join the Marine Corps and then are surprised.
Yeah, like especially during that time frame where the Marine Corps was as big as it's been since World War II. It's like, what do you think's going to happen here? Like, we're just not going to hang out in Camp Lejeune and wear dress blues all day. Like, it's just, with you.
Yeah, for sure. So, after that deployment, what was next up for you?
So on my, I made it very clear. I mean, I think everyone knew if you were around me, I wanted to be in reconnaissance. So I was just kind of jumping up and down. And during that time, that's when the Force Recon flag went down, and we raised the MARSOC flag.
Yep.
So what I was supposed to do as an infantry officer, you're supposed to be with your unit for 2 years. So they wanted you to do 2 deployments, and then you could go to your B billet. Well, everything I put on my fit rep was like, I want to be, first Force Reconnaissance, second Force Reconnaissance, second Recon Battalion, all that stuff. And I'm getting a fit rep in Iraq with Gus Mingus. And, we, like I said, I was having a pretty successful platoon. Kind of the stars aligned. I mean, like I said, Colonel Ken DeTrue was our battalion commander. He, him and I are really close with each other. And what he had happened was his good friend was Colonel Jimmy Bright, who was battalion commander of 2nd Recon Battalion, and they needed officers. And he called up Kenny DeTrue, and he's like, hey, do you got any studs I can get? And he's like, well, these guys are going elsewhere, but he's like, I do have, he's now a new first lieutenant, but he did 1 deployment with us, but I think he can make it over at Recon. He's like, yeah, I'll bring him over if you're good with it. Just put him through the indoc. So I remember sitting down with Gus, and he's like, he just kind of pointed at the little area where it's like where you want your next billet, and he goes, this is going to probably happen sooner than you realize. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're going to get a shot. They're going to put you through the indoc, and if you make it, we're going to cut you orders, and you'll be a platoon commander again over at 2nd Recon. So I'm like, holy crap. I mean, imagine getting back-to-back platoon commander. Like, that never happens. Mm-hmm. So, we got back, did my 30 days leave, and then I just trained for about 2 months, and then I did the indoc and made it. And they cut me orders right over to a 2nd Recon. And while the rest of my peers, they still remained in the 2.8, many of them being XOs and stuff like that. And it was like an honor. I'm like, man, I'm already in Recon, and we were getting ready to leave, go back to Iraq 6 months after that. So I literally was back I did a 1-to-1 pretty much. I was gone for 7, back for about 6.5, and then I went back over for 7 again.
Was there as an officer, is there any difference in the NDOC or the training, like BRC and stuff like that, or do you go through just like every other guy, right?
Yeah, that's everyone. Everyone's just basically a roper or candidate at that point. You just go through, and that's it. So it's just one course. What
was the hardest part for the NDOC, and then follow on into BRC for you?
So the NDOC, it wasn't too bad. I mean, swimming, I can swim. I'm not like Michael Phelps of the world, stuff like that. So, but nice thing I had is I had a lot of training when I was back at Villanova with Gunny Moeller, and we would do a lot of the crossovers, and that's where I think usually people get messed up is when you have to do 25-meter crossover. And I nailed it. I mean, it was fine. I was very comfortable doing it. I was to tell you, the first times I did it at Villanova, I was like purple, and I wasn't looking so great. But I can't thank Gunny Moeller enough for kind of basically putting us through the Recon indoc. And then, due to how quickly we were deploying and then what we did at infantry officer course, they're like, you guys, what you do in IOC is very much comparable to amphibious reconnaissance school. So we're just going to grandfather you through it, basically, and you're just going to have to, we did a quick amphib package at 2nd Recon Battalion to kind of get caught up on that. But yeah, it was like, it was tough, of course, but I just felt pre-prepared for it and, came in really good shape for it. And then it was just kind of, again, going to the 2nd Recon, you got some very senior guys, and kind of part of the deal for when Force Recon went away and MARSOC stood up, each Recon Battalion was going to get one Force platoon for like deep reconnaissance or all that stuff. And then they decided to kind of break them up throughout the battalion. So my platoon was pretty much a lot of Force Recon guys. So I had I had staff sergeants as team leaders, and my platoon sergeant Kenny Urquhart was a complete monster. I mean, Ranger instructor, all that stuff. Just an amazing guy. So for me, it was just a tremendous time, like just to learn a lot. Where in the infantry, I was kind of one pushing, okay, let's do this and that. Here, I was leading, but it's like I was just absorbing so much of these guys' talents and what their experiences were, and having multiple deployments. It was a lot of fun. But then again, I think that's what helped me gain their trust, where I wasn't coming in like, okay, I'm the first lieutenant and we're going to kuzak, we're going to do all this. It's like, oh, hey, you guys tell me what you think. What about this and that? And we would always develop our plans together with me, the platoon sergeant, and team leaders. So it was our plan, and I'd get buy-in for that. And it was just a great group of guys. Still dear friends with a lot of them, and some of them were actually in my wedding. So awesome. It was just a really awesome platoon of Recon Marines.
How did your training for your next deployment differ from your first time? Because now you're training with Recon, whereas before you were with the traditional infantry battalion. Was there a lot of similarities, or were there a lot of differences?
There was there were some similarities and there were some differences. So really, what kind of Recon became, and this during the push, is we almost became like light infantry.
Yeah.
So we were still doing some of the patrolling and all that stuff. Yeah, we got more into direct action stuff, and we did some more deep reconnaissance. And then we were doing some amphib training, but we didn't put a premium on it because we're not going to be doing too much amphib stuff out here, God willing, unless something terrible happens. But it was just so much fun. I mean, like I said, just the amount of talent, and just for me as a young officer to kind of be thrown into that environment with some just rock stars, it was great. And like I said, I learned so much from these guys, and I couldn't thank them enough. And it was just a tight bond. So going into Iraq, we were like, hey, whatever they got, let's go. Like, I mean, we were ready for anything at that point.
What year did you guys go into Iraq, and what area were you in?
Yeah, so I did 06 to 07 with 2.8, then 07 to 08 was 2nd Recon. So basically, we fell in, and this was the interesting part for me. So when I was leaving with 2.8, that's right when the surge was happening. And it was 2.8 and 1.6 were basically the coin flip of what battalion was going to extend to help with the surge. 1.6 was one who lost the coin toss, so they stayed and we came back, which totally changed my whole entire life, projection. And, I go in there and I'm kind of like, all right, here we go. I kind of know these areas. We're still operating in Fallujah. We were based out of Camp Fallujah, and we were working for RCT 6. And it was boring. The surge worked, where essentially all the Al-Qaeda were basically pushed out by the local populace. Like the sheikhs all got together and said, listen, we might not be thrilled with these American Marines, but these Al-Qaeda guys are really doing some terrible things to us.
For sure.
And it was all due to them. And we were just kind of trying to look for work. And eventually, 2nd MEF, Marine Expeditionary Force, just pulled us up to work for them. So we were basically a force reconnaissance asset.
Nice.
And we were able to work all throughout Al Anbar. So I saw a lot of that area. And things kind of started revving up kind of like midway through the deployment, where we really kind of had all the insurgents on the run, and we're pushing up north to Kurdistan. And we got to do some combined missions with the SEALs and really achieve some great things. We found some pretty crazy things you wouldn't think you would find out there that I'm not going to get into. But okay. it was just a really wild deployment. But to me, it was just very breathtaking too. This is when I started learning about fake news. So we're literally sitting on a point of a poo site, right?
Point of origin.
On that. Yeah, there you go. Point of origin. And nothing happened. And it's for 2 days, we're just staring at the desert. So I go back and I'm writing my debrief, and in my office I had like a little TV on with the AFN. You know how they just kind of bounce around to different news channels. So MSNBC comes on, and Keith Olbermann's talking, and I love Keith Olbermann on ESPN. I thought he was great on SportsCenter and all that. Well, he's doing this like Walter Cronkite thing about how many days after mission accomplished and all that stuff, and he goes, "How bad is it in Iraq? How bad is it in Iraq? The Marines are most fierce fighting force once out of Iraq because it's that violent." And I'm sitting there like, I'm really like writing a debrief, like I am bored, nothing's happening. Like I'm like, what is this guy talking about?
Yeah.
And then I sat there and thought, I was like, let's just say my mom's watching that. What's going through her head right now? You know, or loved ones like that. I'm like, that was so irresponsible for whatever provocative thing, and you were totally telling a lie.
Mm-hmm.
The surge worked. I mean, it definitely cleared things out, and we eradicated Al-Qaeda for the time being in that area where once was this infested through the Triangle of Death, and I was just amazed at how irresponsible people could be.
Fear porn, man. It's fear porn. It's fear porn, and it's anyone that is not side with me on politics, fuck them, and we're just gonna every story is gonna get framed in a negative light. That's exactly how it is. I just finished up school this year at San Diego State University's journalism school, and
awesome.
The fear porn is what it's all about. And it's sad to see, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's funny, I was on ship, and there was a task force mission going into, I think it was Yemen. This is all open source. It was all on the news. It was where one of those SEALs got killed. And I was the watch officer. I was in there like, everything's happening. You know, I'm sitting there like briefing everybody, watching everything go down. And MSNBC on AFN is on one of the side TVs, and they're just talking about the mission after it's over, but completely getting it all wrong and framing it in like the worst way ever just to try to make the politics look bad. And I'm like, man, this is such bullshit, man. Like the fact that they're allowed to just go on, and that's, hey, man, that's First Amendment. That's freedom of speech. Yep. Like they're allowed to do it. But the unfortunate thing is there's so many people that have zero idea of what's actually happening in the world. Their point of view of what's actually occurring in the world is so distorted from watching that garbage news, you know, cable news and shit like that, or not finding multiple news sources to back up. You know, they just trust one person, Rachel Maddow's telling me the truth. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's disgusting.
Yeah, and that's one. Congratulations, my wife actually graduated from San Diego State. But
cool.
Yeah, I was doing kind of like I was a communications major at Villanova, and had like a concentration in mass media, and yeah, my whole entire point of view changed when I read Bernard Goldberg's book Bias, and you just kind of saw how the media would manipulate things, and it starts with a great story with him and Dan Rather were like really tight friends. He's like, Dan Rather is the godfather to one of my kids, but he's like, he manipulated, I think, like a New York City mayor election or something where he's just kind of not pushing out the truth. Mm-hmm. And Bernie, it was like, you know, and he was his producer. He's like, to me, like the news should just put out the tools and let the people build what they want of it. You know, don't give your own personal opinion. So he wrote a piece in like the New York Post, and he's like told Dan Rather, he's like, Dan, there's gonna be something coming out tomorrow. It's not gonna be that pleasant, but I had to speak my mind. He goes, Bernie, you know, we've been friends a long time. We'll be friends a long time after this. And he's like, and we're saying this as I'm looking at a picture of him holding my kid on his desk. And he's like, and Dan Rather and I have never spoke a day after that.
Damn.
You know, yeah. So that really caught me where it's like, it's not Walter Cronkite anymore and all these people. It's like they just kind of have their own, they're like op-eds now. Yeah. And you just kind of learn how to maneuver through that. And
it's one thing after another. You got Brian Williams, who got caught lying about what he did in country. You have that picture of Anderson Cooper standing in the deep puddle while his camera crew standing there, you know, like trying to make it look worse than what it is. It's just all these things. It's like, dude, just be a fucking journalist, man. Just be a straight news person. Like, give the facts, all the facts. You know, not just the ones that help you or your cause.
Tell the full story. I mean, that Brian Williams thing, that was crazy. I remember, like, he was just getting praised by everyone and going on late night shows, and I'm like, now this guy is starting to talk about other people's credibility. I'm like, how the hell does this work? And how are Americans so like fickle? They just kind of let that thing slide. I'm like, no way.
I can't believe he's still he's still on the news. I can't believe he still has his own show. It's mind blowing. I'm like, dude's a straight liar. Like, he has no integrity, but you're still letting him be on the news. Anyways, we went off on a little tangent of the
that's all good, man.
fake news there. So can you talk about how you guys were employed doing reconnaissance like missions and stuff while you were in Iraq? Like, was it like, man, I'm laying in my fucking hide out in the desert just staring at something like you said for 2 days, or was there other things, like was it any kind of dynamic movements into like compounds and like setting up a hide? Like how did
Yeah.
that look?
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty much doing it all. So yeah, we were going on the sniper hides, and then what was really a fun time was really we started pushing up north towards Samara, and that was kind of uncharted territory.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the things. I mean, we were going into compounds, we were doing raids, we were taking down. We took down a couple cells, found a lot of HME, all the explosives and stuff like that, and we were, able to blow it in place and do all that. And yeah, we were moving pretty aggressive as kind of sometimes I guess a DA type movement, which is a lot of fun. Sometimes we were just doing, vehicle ops where we would just go and have to circle the wagons in the middle of the desert and just kind of go around and start looking at what was going on and paint the picture, doing true reconnaissance and, or doing those reconnaissance missions. Some things I can't say, but, things where we had to kind of go where enemy was and kind of go do our thing and paint some pictures. And the idea was not to be caught and not to shoot and not let them know and kind of come back unscathed. And it was a lot of fun. But like I said, I had a lot of pipe hitters in that platoon. So I was just learning a lot from some of their experiences. It was just a tremendous time.
Are there any good books from Iraq that talk about like Recon's involvement and kind of some of the missions and stuff that they did? Do you know of any?
I don't think so. I mean, Generation Kill is what it is.
Yeah, but that's the invasion.
Yeah, but no, I don't think there's been really anything out there. I mean, I think the more sexy books would probably be stuff focused on Fallujah and things like that.
Yeah, No True Glory is a good one.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything, kind of like the after post Fallujah type op stuff.
Yeah. What was the consensus within the recon community when Generation Kill came out? Like, what was everybody's kind of thoughts on that?
So that came out. I remember I read that book. I was actually in 2-8 doing Mojave Viper, and I read that book.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the characters, some of the people kind of have their own opinions of them. Some people probably got embellished a little bit more and were kind of badasses and all that stuff. I just think people kind of rolled their eyes a little bit at it. Like some of it was good to go, and some of the guys are great guys. I'm friends with some of them. They're solid. They're awesome dudes, and some of the guys were kind of like, they are what they are. But I just think people just kind of rolled with it. It wasn't really that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Type of thing. It was kind of, it was almost like a non-factor. It kind of came up and made people make jokes, and it's like that movie Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen.
Oh man.
Do those cracks and stuff.
I remember when it came out, people were like, man, this is like a realistic Marine movie. They're just showing their conversations, the ridiculous stuff they say. And I remember I was in when it came out, and I remember the Commandant and the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps were like, this is not how Marines are. We watched 10 minutes of the film, and we turned it off because it was gross. And I'm like, oh, they got to the part where they were looking at that girl Soto. I was like, that's the part where they turned it off.
You're right. You do. I thought that the HBO series was really well done. I mean, it got me right in the beginning with like the radio and just guys talking, like just triggered you right back to being in a vehicle and just kind of going back and forth. So
yeah,
I think really good job in a realism there. And I thought it was a pretty excellent show. I mean,
for sure.
Yeah.
So how long were you with Recon? Did you just do one pump with them, or did you do another one and then try to get over to Marsoc, or how did that go?
I did one. So I came back and basically, we got back and then kind of took a little bit of time, and basically there was going to stand up a force recon company again, and he wanted me to take one of the force platoons. And we were kind of getting ready to, we were pushing into Afghanistan. So I'm like, I told my battalion commander, I'm like, I'd like to take it, but I'd like to be the first platoon out. And he goes, that's not going to happen. This guy is next in the chute. He has to go. And then we started talking about MARSOC, and he said, he's like, listen, you didn't join the Marine Corps to be a special operator. You joined to be a Marine. I'm like, well, sir, I'll always be a Marine. But, I went back to the commercials again. I'm like, sir, you got guys running across bridges over lava and fighting dragons. I'm like, that's what you're bringing in as Marines. We want to see how the rabbit hole can go. And if I had this opportunity, I would like to take it. And he was a very fair man, Colonel Schaefer, and he kind of took a step back and he goes, well, your first lieutenant, senior first lieutenant, could be captain here in like 6 months. He's like, this is probably the most appropriate time for you to go. So he's like, you go through selection, you make it. He's like, I'll cut your orders and let you go. So from there, it was 6 months, no alcohol, doing 2 a days, 6 days a week. I was single, so I mean, I'll just go home and I would do the best I could to get 8 hours of sleep every night,
Mm-hmm.
and just watching my weight and doing like just eating healthy and beating up my feet, those things. I mean, I was just hiking forever,
Yeah.
and went into selection. And again, selection was a tremendous course. I mean, when I got through selection, and you still don't know if you made it or not, I was thinking to myself, I learned so much about myself here. Even the land nav. I mean, they had guys from JSOC and stuff who come up and contract you and teach you land nav, where we could only use a wrist compass. We had a big fat pen, and there was no protractor or nothing like that. It was kind of you're on your own, but they taught you how to read the earth
Yeah. Yeah.
and like set your rails, set your backstop, get going, and they would just kind of dump you out like you didn't have a number, or you didn't have a name, you just had a number. So I was 016. Sometimes it would ask you, you put you in blue group, whatever, and you just get these instructions from a cone, and it would say, this is where you are, this is where you have to go, and you plot it, and you go up to the instructor, like, this is where I am, this is where I have to go, and they're like, go. And then you just hauling ass, and next thing you know, you just find a guy sitting in a chair drinking coffee, and you're like, blue 016, ready to report. They're like, report. I'm like, this is where I am, this is where I was, and they're like, get your instructions from the cone, and off you went. And even in the beginning, they jammed us through a bunch of psychological tests and a bunch of Wonderlic exams. And, we started weeding guys out at that part where guys didn't have it. And we did like kind of a PFT and a swim mod thing, wasn't too bad. And then, yeah, we had to go to an undisclosed area. They took your cell phone, your wallet, and, ripped off your name tape. I mean, you still had your Marine name tape on. And, it was just a lot of unknown. And then, like, it was kind of crazy. You'd come back from land nav and you would just see these racks were gone. And people just, they weren't there anymore. And probably one of the more difficult things was, I mean, you look at what they do at Buds or, Green Beret selection, there's a lot of yelling and all that stuff going on. The instructors were stoic.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't yell at you. They wouldn't do anything. So you're just kind of like, am I doing okay or not? Because naturally someone yells at you, you're going to pick it up a little bit. They just want to see how you were going to operate. And then next thing you know, you kind of go into team phases and you're kind of going through there and you're peering each other. And it was a really eye-opening selection, and I thought they did a really outstanding job with it.
How would you compare it to, well, first off, when you were going through, this was still kind of early on, in the Raider.
Yeah, 2008, I was going through. Yeah, I was like one of the second or third selections or something like that.
So it's actually changed since then, correct? Like location, I'm pretty sure the location changed, has it not?
It might have. I don't know.
Okay, well, either way.
Yeah.
When you were going through, were most of the people going through also, Recon Marines, or did you have a lot of people coming from the fleet also?
Yeah, they were bringing a lot of, it was combat arms guys. Basically, they wanted you to have 2 deployments. We were trying to do an 18 X-ray type thing, so like you could enlist and then go right to selection, kind of like what Army SF does. And that didn't really work out too well because, I mean, our first thing we have to do is an unknown distance hike in the middle of the night. And you're literally, where I was, you're just staring at a gravel hill going straight up, which, that's a pain in the ass with the ruck on. It's like not a great way to warm up. And like I just remember these dudes bombed up the hill, and we had chem lights. And if you wanted to quit, you just had to break your chem light and sit in your rucksack, and someone would come by and get you on the ATV or whatever. And by the time we crested the hill, some of these guys already cracked their chem lights, and they were just done. And then you just kind of saw some of the maturity side of problem solving. They just didn't have it. And I believe the Marine Corps kind of said, all right, we don't need to do this. So, we definitely want to have guys sometime in the conventional forces, which I think is great because it definitely, you know where you came from, right? Like, you're just not walking to some special ops unit and get all this like cool gear and all that stuff. You know where you came from and what you are and what you had to do to get there. I think it makes you like, feel more earned at that point.
Was it mind blowing for you to see someone quit so early on with like a task like that? Like walking up the hill.
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of at the point where I'm like, yeah, like I didn't care. I mean,
You're
if
just
you're gonna
doing
quit
yourself, yeah.
Yeah, like, I'm like, like I know, like the only thing I can do right now is control myself. Like I can't even see people around me. We can't talk to each other. So to me, it was just like, hey, walk up the hills, run down the hills, and do the recon shuffle on the flat road, and just get to wherever you got to get to.
What kind of advice would you give to someone, let's say they're coming from the air wing or something like that, they're not even combat arms. What kind of advice would you give to someone like that that's considering going over and going through assessment and selection and, trying to become a Raider?
Yeah, I think, big thing you just want to talk to them about, some of your experiences, what you face, and some of the things you're going to be put forward, and are you going to be able to handle that? And, I've had some talks with people who are like, I don't know, that's not really my thing. But if you get guys like, hey, I really want to do it, I think the way they can train now, going through, selection, then you go through the individual training course. I think they do such a great job to get everyone up to speed, and it might even be better if you didn't even have an infantry background, because you're kind of a sponge at this point. You're going to learn exactly the way they're teaching you how to shoot. So my big thing, I just tell them, like, there's a great online training ad for MARSOC, how to get ready for selection, and I'll just tell them to follow that and just say, like, hey, cut out the booze, eat clean, get some sleep, and just beat up your feet and make sure you're just rock solid, because if you can handle the physical stuff, they're going to throw a lot of mental stuff at you. But if you're physically fit, you can just handle the mental kind of dilemmas they'll throw at you that much more better.
After you've gone through, later on, they added that 2-week, like, kind of in-doc period where guys go through that. And I've had a lot of people say that they're glad that they did that, because it actually prepared guys who were going into it not knowing anything and kind of thought they were prepared. And that kind of showed them, like, oh, shit, I'm not prepared. Thanks for kind of getting me up to speed before the full shebang kicks off. What are your thoughts on that in-doc?
I think that's a great idea. Because, it is kind of thing, like, maybe you have a guy in the air wing who's not as comfortable with a pistol or a rifle as a guy who's in the infantry, or just understanding tactics or how to patrol or things like that, where you can kind of really get the fundamentals back into them again. I think it's a great thing, and that would just kind of, now when you're going through the actual course, you don't have to slow down for someone or whatever it may be, because they're just lagging behind. And ultimately, like, it's funny, when I went through selection, I mean, we were fed well pretty much the entire time. And I remember asking them after you get picked, and we're hanging out in the chow hall and just watching TV and laughing. I'm like, how'd you guys put this thing together? And they're like, well, we went to, like, all the selections. We looked at the JSOC ones, and they're like, we actually even went to the NFL about their combine. That's why you guys got all the Wonderlic exams and all the psychological stuff, because it costs a couple $1 million to put you guys together. So we want to make sure we know as much about you as we can. And, but they're like, the reason why we fed you guys, like, we do enough in here where we know if you guys mentally have it and you guys can endure in harsh situations. We didn't want to, like, malnourish you guys where maybe someone breaks an ankle or sprains something and they can't continue. And now we just lost that talent. So I think it's a great idea there to maybe slow it down for a little bit, make sure people are kind of up to snuff, so they don't fall so far behind ITC that you got to drop them or recycle them. I mean, ultimately, you want to get them through and make sure they're effective and go do some great things.
I'd say the Marine Corps has done a really good job recently, in the last decade, of getting guys ready for stuff like that. The app that you're talking about, I remember guys used to use that just to do workouts in regular units, just to have, like, oh, hey, we'll do this workout today, like with the platoon or something like that. That was a really good app. Another good resource for guys considering going into, like, the reconnaissance community is the Basic Reconnaissance course has an Instagram page, and they just constantly post, different exercises they're doing on there, guys going through, different phases of BRC and kind of giving people an example. So for people that are, like, interested in that, I think they should definitely seek that kind of stuff out. For you, as an officer, is it any different for you than it is as an enlisted guy? I mean, so I don't know how it works for officers. Like, one, when you go to Recon as an officer, is that your B billet, or can you stay in Recon for the rest of your career? And does the same principle hold true at MARSOC?
Yeah, so with when I went to Recon, that was still like we're still Second Marine Division, right? So I still had my division orders, so that was still like my initial order stuff. It didn't really change, even though I changed units. With MARSOC and now Raiders, it was interesting because when it first started, they really wanted to keep everyone just in for 5 years, and then you had to recycle back into the reconnaissance community or the infantry, or wherever you came from. And the big push we had to win, and thank God we did, was like, you got to get an MOS for the enlisted. Like, there's certain things we can do in SOCOM we just can't do in conventional forces, and that's coming from Congress. Certain directives we're able to do things. So we're like, you just can't have enlisted guys who are going to be the backbone here rotating in and out, and like just letting that talent walk out the door where they can't really utilize all the things they know in a conventional unit. And then with the officers, they're doing the same thing. It's like 5 years. So I did my 5 years, and they were like, oh, we're going to send you back to the infantry. And they're like, you only commanded a special operations team, and that's not that much. And I'm like, well, I mean, okay, we're TO'd at 14, but I'm like, I was running the 7th Afghan Special Forces Battalion, which I had 777 people, 14 contractors, 4 dogs, and a bunch of, like, special operators. So, and I ran a camp. Like, I kind of got to. I'm sure I could be a company commander. I'm not, but all good. And it was just frustrating for us where we're like, you know what, like we're just done. So that's when some of us just walked out. Like it was one of the reasons I left. And luckily, I think about a year and a half later, they closed loop the officers to keep them in so they can stay in special operations. And one of the big things was what I heard. It was General Amos, our former commandant, was talking with Admiral McRaven, who was in charge of SOCOM, and they're good friends. And he's like, hey, when would I ever have one of my Marines become a TSOC commander, which is a colonel billet? And McRaven's like, you never will. And he goes, what do you mean? He's like, well, you send them away for 2 years, and they come back, they're missing billets.
Mm-hmm.
And Amos was on his way out the door, and he goes, oh, well, we'll just, like, close loop them. And McRaven's like, well, okay, we've been asking that for a while. And then he goes, oh, and, you know, we're going to redesignate them Marine Raiders. And the rumor was McRaven goes, man, you really are retiring, aren't you? He goes, oh, yeah. He's like, you know,
I'm on the way out.
My back, you know, type of thing. So
yeah.
It's good that they did that because, you know, having the Marine officers go back over to the Marine Special Operations School. And, you know, they've been there, they've done that, you know, and they can understand the training that the enlisted guys are doing. Because in the beginning, you might have had some captains over there at MSOS as, like, lead instructors, and they've never even deployed with an MSOT before. So it was kind of like, hey, we kind of need guys to kind of get there. And now we're finally starting to grow up where you're getting regimental commanders were at one point a team commander and stuff. And eventually have a 2-star who was, no kidding, a team commander at one point and kind of knows how the whole machine runs. So I think that's a very smart thing the Marine Corps did. They were really worried about promotions. They're like, oh, you guys can be bottlenecked. There's not that many billets. But it's like, hey, we're all big boys here. If we want to stay here and do it, I got it. I'll get out as lieutenant colonel. Fine. You know, no big deal. Yeah, right. It's like not more about the rank. It's about the mission and the men that you're with.
I always told guys when I was, you know, when I was like, dude, I'll stay a staff sergeant for the rest of my career if they just let me be a JTAC the whole time. You know, because for us, it was like, they wanted you to do 2 deployments, and then you go back and go become a fires chief at some artillery battalion or something like that. And I'm like, that's lame, man. Like, after going from, like, doing all this crazy stuff and learning all this stuff, and then turn around and put me on, like me, I got sent to go be a MU fires chief. That was my last billet before I got out. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? You know, I'm like one of 3 JTAC evaluators on the West Coast, and you have me here at the MU fires, like, billet? That makes no sense. And, yeah, so it's. I understand what you're talking about. You want to keep that talent there because not only are you like, you're maintaining like a high group of quality individuals, but you're losing so much institutional knowledge. You know, if someone leaves after 5 years, like for me, what I always told guys, about 3 or 4 years, about the time they want you to switch from being a JTAC to go do something else. That's when everything's kind of clicking and you get it. You kind of get the full picture of like how things are running. So I assume it was the same way there. And I remember I had a buddy who went through. Well, I remember they I think the reasoning they originally were saying like, hey, we're gonna do 5 years of MARSOC and then send them back to the fleet so they can make the fleet forces even better. And it was like, okay, I kind of get that, but like you said, they're not doing the same mission. Like, what are they getting better at? Because the missions are completely different, so that doesn't necessarily kind of pan out. And one of my friends went through A&S, made it all the way to the end, but didn't get selected, which I guess means you can come back and try it again if you want. You know, he had that opportunity. But they were like, hey, we're only doing 5 years, and you're going to go back to the infantry. And he was like, fuck that, I'm just going to go to Recon. Re-enlisted, signed a Recon contract, and then like a month later, they're like, hey, you can stay in MARSOC for your entire career, and it's an MOS now. And he's like, God damn it. Like, he was super pissed because he just wanted to get into one of those units and stay there, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. And you nailed it, too. I remember they were like, well, you guys can come back and show us how to patrol. And I'm like, patrol? I'm like, go get a Recon Marine or a Scout Sniper. Like, they'll patrol circles around us right now. It's like, that's like their bread and butter, you know, things like that. So, yeah, that's a tough story, man. But yeah, that's kind of how I was a little bit. Like, you know, like when I was that 9 years, I was about to become a major, and that's kind of when you lose your spurs. Like, I would have stayed a captain, team commander forever if I could have. And you're kind of like, I don't know, man. Like, you know, I'm going to be a major. I'm going to be sent over here. I'm going to be doing this. Like, I don't really want to ride a desk anymore, type of thing.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about. I don't know how much you can talk about with your deployments with the Raider Battalion, but I also want to talk about your company too, man. I feel like maybe we should have another episode and just talk about just the Raider Battalion stuff on a next episode or something like that. Are you good with that?
Yeah, that's all good.
Okay, well, let's stop there with that, and let's talk about, you know, let's jump forward. You got out of the Marine Corps. What brought you into creating, the Helmand Valley Grow Company?
So when it was probably around it was like 2016, I started really seeing what was going on with veterans and the suicide rates and the opioid epidemic. So started a nonprofit called Valor Brothers Foundation with a three-tier approach of like personal, medical, and economic. So personal, kind of like a big brother, big sister network. Just as you're having an active duty member transition out, you just have a veteran who's kind of been there and done that. Because as you know, transition is a lot more difficult than people realize.
Yeah.
Medical side, we were doing VA disability claims. We would help out if the person didn't feel like they got the rating they deserved. We would take it over, pay for it and ensure that they got the rating that they earned. And then also, if we had veterans suffering with opiate, alcohol, PTS, or all the above, our director of treatment and recovery can help get them into a treatment center, just kind of let them take a knee and, get back into the fight once they're ready to go. And then the last part was the economic of finding a job and, so they have that sense of purpose again and hopefully avoid a mistake that they can't come back from. And then during that was when Andy Myers, he was staff sergeant, Raider with me. We just had a really rough deployment in 2012. This isn't anything to brag about. It's just the reality of the situation. I had a colonel tell me, he's like, this has been the bloodiest summer for Special Operation Forces since the Vietnam War. And, we were just doing what I'm sure a lot of us do. We were trying to solve our problems at the bottom of a bottle. And Andy just looked great one day. And I'm like, dude, what's going on? And he goes, well, he's like, I gave up a fifth of Jack for a joint. And you're like, whoa, like, what are you talking about? He goes, listen, he's like, I'm not blacking out at night. I'm not drinking and driving. He's like, I wake up in the morning, I feel great. And he's like, I'm actually getting into cultivation, and it's really helping me transition from a warrior to a gardener. And I'm like, man, that's really impactful. So I tried some, and it was like the first night I got to sleep in I don't know how many years. And we're like, man, we got to do something about this. So we just didn't want to be another veteran advocacy group. There's some great ones out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, how else can we kind of move the dial? So I had an opportunity to meet with some members of Congress. And I asked them, like, what would you have to do to get medical cannabis into the VA system? And they're like, you have a lot more support than you realize. But a lot of people behind closed doors say, yeah, I believe it works, but they will never go out in front of a camera and say anything unless you have data. So they're like, not only do you need to get data, but you need to have American doctors to verify it.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, okay, easy day. And I walk out. I'm like, how the fuck am I going to do this? And went to a UCLA cannabis symposium and met a great guy at a coffee break named Alon Blott, who worked for a company called Niamedic Healthcare and Research Services. And they've been operating for about 20 years in Israel and doing some great things. Obviously, he's a veteran himself. He was a sergeant major in the IDF. And we just started bonding and kind of going through and talking about it. And he's like, well, listen, to do this, you're going to need to get a thing called an institutional review board. He's like, they're really expensive and they're really hard to get. I'm like, all right. And, we started kind of doing the numbers and we're trying to figure out how we could actually fund this thing. And it was going to be like a couple $1 million before we'd probably see even like a positive money coming back at us. So we saw a Paul Newman salad dressing bottle and said, 100% of charity profits to charity. And we're like, we asked our lawyer and CPA, like, hey, how does that work? And they're like, profits are profits. Like whatever you got, you can push back in. It's all good. So we decided like, hey, let's kind of put our money where our mouth is and start an adult use brand in California. And we wanted to keep a military niche to it. So when you serve in the Helmand province in Afghanistan as a Marine Raider, you get an HVGC tattoo for Helmand Valley Gun Club. So we threw that up on the wall and we went like Helmand Valley Growers Company. We're like, oh, that kind of came together really quick. So we're like,
let's go. Too easy.
Yeah, we're like, so let's go brief the boys, make sure they're good, And we explained to all the guys who were part of HVGC what we wanted to do, what our objective was, and we just want to make sure everyone's cool. Like, if you're like, hey, we got to trademark this, all that. If you're not cool, we'll walk away. And they're like, dude, not only are we cool with it, but can we get a job with you guys afterwards? And we're like, yeah, man, for sure. And, there's a lot of, emotional times trying to, like, get this thing funded, get up and going. We had a really great investor. He was going to come through. He was an Army Ranger, self-made millionaire type guy. Has a great story about when he was at North Carolina where he watched Michael Jordan and Lawrence Taylor play one-on-one basketball against each other. And he's like, there is no more intense competitor than Michael Jordan. But he, like I said, stage 4 cancer survivor, but we're ready to get going. We kind of had a verbal handshake. So we're going to sign the paperwork. And he went on a vacation, came back, goes, hey, I got to go through like a physical for a couple days. So he's like, but I'll be back out and we'll get going. It was like 2 weeks we didn't hear from him. And then we did, and basically came back and said, I don't have cancer again, but the way my blood work's looking, the doctor's like, hey, if you keep going at this pace, you are going to probably get it again, or potentially, and you got to go in semi-retirement. So it was emotional. He was really upset because he loved this idea. He's like, I've been looking for something like this all my life, and we were like, oh man. And we were free agents, so we got connected with a group here in California called Platinum, and they wanted to help support Valor Brothers through. They have a great program called the React Foundation, where they donate to veterans, animal shelters, breast cancer, homeless, all that, world hunger, a lot of great initiatives. The only problem they had is people didn't want to take their money because they're cannabis. So when they called me up, they're like, "Would you mind taking it?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I'll take the money.
For
I mean,
sure.
why wouldn't they?" And they're like, "Oh, well, come down. We'll sit and talk about it." And I went through, and then eventually I kind of told them about my idea with Helmand Valley Growers Company, and they're like, "You got to meet George and Cody Sadler. It's a father-son team who founded Platinum." And I'm like, "All right." So they had us come down the next week, and I was pitching Cody and George. And at first, I didn't know it was going too well. I was like, I don't know. Like, they're kind of like, well, we're not really looking about bringing on another brand, and kind of had some bad luck with some other things. And when I started going into about the research I wanted to do, where, the ultimate goal is to develop a formulation and a treatment protocol, and to get that into the VA, thus making it federally legal, they were just kind of blown away by that. And I never forget, they both just looked at each other and smiled, and George goes, all right, get in here. He's like, we're going to back you guys up. He's like, I don't need any money from you guys. He's like, we just make us whole once you start selling, and we'll go from there. And we probably were one of one brands in the country that could literally put product on the shelf for $0. And we've been with them ever since, and have been great mentors, and just tremendous friendship has grown from that. But with our first $50,000 worth of profits, we were able to pay and develop a study design to see if medical cannabis can reduce the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And the NIAMEDIC team is led by a guy named Dr. Victor Novak, who was at one point in charge of Harvard's Clinical Research Institute, has vast knowledge in cannabis, FDA trials. And then out of nowhere, we were able to bring on UC Irvine, and they're coming on as our American doctors, and they're going to be our principal investigators. So we got our American face that we needed.
Nice.
And right now we're just kind of finalizing our funds for our first study, which will start this fall with 60 veterans. And from there, we'll develop a formulation and treatment protocol. We'll do a more robust study with about 200 veterans here in California. And then from there, we're going to move it into Michigan, and we'll do about 50 veteran study with the same formulation, same protocol, showing that it's repeatable and accessible. And at that point, we'll go back in front of Congress, raise the right hand, saying, here's your data and here's your American doctors. Can we proceed with FDA trials? And that's kind of the ultimate goal.
That's awesome, man. That's pretty.
Yeah.
That's a pretty wild trip. Like.
Yeah.
When you're talking about like cannabis use and stuff, are you trying to do treatments with like flower or oils, or do you have are you trying a bunch of different things just to kind of see what works?
Well, it will come out to be, and that's a great question. I mean, we were thinking like edibles and all this stuff, and it's just amazing sitting here talking with the Israelis, who are just so much more knowledgeable than we are. And they're like, listen, you can't really do it through a vape device because they haven't been through clinical trials. And they're like, what has been are tinctures and pills. So they're like, that's going to be the kind of way we administer it. So this first one will be an observational, where they go out into a legal shop in California, they purchase what they're using, and we'll kind of go through, and they'll get phone calls every week to see what's going on. It's going to be very journal intensive. And from there, we'll start understanding what cultivars are working and kind of maneuver from there, and then develop a formulation that we'll start administering either a pill or a tincture form.
Is there any kind of does it come in the form kind of like an inhaler? Is there a product out there like that?
There are some. I've seen what the Israelis have done, especially with some of the geriatric. They would use more of almost like a balloon type thing, where they kind of just put the smoke in front of them and just kind of let it hit them, almost like a vaporizer type thing.
Okay, old school vaporizer.
Yeah, and then or they'll use the tincture. Those have been kind of more the effective ways that I've seen it.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure about straight up kind of inhaler type.
I think it's good stuff, man. I think it's great. You're right. I got back from singing, and I was probably drinking a half a bottle of rum a day, for at least a couple months, just because, just to sleep, just to get better sleep at night and stuff, because I wasn't sleeping very well. Not only because of, shit that happens, but just like the schedule you're on, you're just not used to normal sleep while you're in a combat zone. And,
Absolutely.
and, yeah, I think that's a way better option. If someone gave me the option, they're like, you can only drink or you can only smoke weed, or cannabis. I'm the cannabis guy for sure,
Yeah.
And was this your first time trying it? I'm assuming
Yeah.
you hadn't tried it before the Marine
Never
Corps or
tried
anything
it
like
before.
that.
And like, yeah, it's like, just being like an athlete, and I was just like, I just didn't want to put smoke in my lungs. But, I tell everyone what's funny about it is if I'm restless in bed or I'm moving around, like I never thought I'd hear my wife say, like, can you go downstairs and smoke some pot? And you're like, oh, if
Okay.
I must, yeah, it's like, oh, the things I do for marriage. But yeah, so it's been a game changer, and just really exciting. And like, even people back home in Pennsylvania, I mean, I got my uncle who's a medical patient now, and my brother's doing it and stuff like that. And, it's just the benefits are there, and it's just helping, I think, to live a lot healthier, cleaner lifestyle.
Yeah, for sure. And what kind of, since it is federally illegal still, what kind of hurdles are you having to like jump over to kind of do what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so with that institutional review board, that was a lot of hurdles. So what we have in the University of Mississippi is called the NIDA program, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and they have a DEA license. And I tell everyone it's in their name, National Institute of Drug Abuse. I mean, look, I don't know if we're looking for cannabis to solve anything. They more or less want to show the dangers of it. So a lot of people would have to work with them in order to do cannabis research, and it's low quality THC. I mean, it's not stored properly, and I would even question if it would pass California third party state testing. I mean, I know it gets moldy and everything as well.
Hmm.
So we wanted to get a private IRB. So the IRB was asking us, like, do you have a DEA license? We're like, we don't need one, and it was a lot of education on that side. And we really wanted to get going and do potentially a pilot study, but they were kind of like, hey, hold on, let's slow the roll here a little bit. This is going to be a private IRB. We want to do an observation on first and kind of see how it bears fruit from there. And even trying to bring UC Irvine on with it, that was a lot of hurdles because they're, again, they get federal grants and all that stuff, but they were able to maneuver around with it because our principal investigator, she's fantastic, and she really wanted to be part of this research, and she really made the case to make it happen. And even one of the other doctors who's part of the UC Irvine team, she was a former VA doctor, and she lost one of her veterans from opiates when they cut him off.
Hmm.
Just cold turkey, didn't wean him
Yeah.
off or anything, and he committed suicide. And she
Cool.
goes, this is so near and dear to me because I know the potential of cannabis, so we're just really looking forward to it. So those have been kind of a little bit of hurdles that we had to face. But, we'll see what happens with politics and the government as it go. But what I'm really happy to see is there's a lot more research going on.
Yeah.
And the more of us who do it, it's just we're all going to produce the same results. And more that goes out there, they just can't deny it. And hopefully we can knock it down the schedule and start doing things a little bit more properly like a regular business and, get this into the hands of veterans.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even a majority of Republicans now say that, which is the conservatives would say that they think it should be legalized or at a minimum decriminalized. You know what I'm saying? Like someone like me, I got arrested twice for weed before I joined. I'm lucky that there was a surge going on because if there wasn't, I wouldn't have gotten the waivers to even have joined the Marine Corps. You know, which is kind of a ridiculous thing when you look back at it. What's your take, because you're doing this for medical purposes and stuff, what's your take on the usage of it for just recreationally?
I think it's great. I mean, I tell people it's like, what's the difference between someone smoking half a joint or having 2 martinis?
Yep.
It's like, and again, I mean, nothing really bad happens with people smoking. I mean, you kind of chill out, really just no fighting, nothing like that. I mean, I just think you wake up refreshed. I mean, like I said, we've all had our cocktails at nighttime to help us go to sleep. Well, you're going to probably wake up not feeling too hot the next day, and you kind of have to get through that, and you just get into a vicious cycle. For me, when I smoke, I'm down, and I get up, and I'm like, all right, kind of do my thing, and I feel good. So I think it's a great alternative than drinking.
Yeah, 100%, for sure, man. That's good stuff, dude. That's cool. As soon as, like I said at the beginning, as soon as I saw your company's name and I looked you up, I'm like, I got to have these people on because it's a stigmatized thing in some groups, of people. Some people still don't understand that it's not just it's not some crazy drug. You know what I'm saying? Like there's people out there that are so miseducated on what cannabis is and stuff. They think it's like, equivalent to like heroin or something like that when it's nowhere near that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it's good stuff, man. And what do you think the next 6 months holds for your company?
we'll get through the first study, and then we're going to launch into the next one. And I think what that'll do is we've gotten some national attention from it. I think once we're actually doing the study itself, I think that's going to bear a lot of attraction onto it. And we're just going to kind of keep working in a company-wide, just keep expanding. We'll probably bring on some more reps, and we really want to kind of start saturating California. I mean, we're in close to like 90-some stores right now, and there's about 800 stores. So we really want to try to take a good swipe and get in as many as possible. But we just kind of see the brand keep growing. Really want to kind of start building a national presence, especially with like some of our gear that we're got our clothing line coming out and everything. And just, what's really exciting too is we're with Cody and George, we're opening up a micro business up in Lake Elsinore. So we'll have a 5,000 square foot cultivation indoor and a storefront. And that's going to be a great opportunity to bring some veterans in to work with us, because at the end of the day, we want to have veterans making medicine for veterans.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. How do you, for the cultivation, how involved in that are you? Do you get in there and?
No, there'd be a famine if I got involved. So that is Andy's wheelhouse. And trust me, like, you ever want to talk to him, he will spend 2 hours talking to about one plant. I mean, that guy knows the science, and he's passionate about it. He's passionate about life. But it's his rodeo, and he's been doing it for now about 6 years or so. And, he's going to start bringing in teams and start mentoring some guys who want to learn how to cultivate, and it's going to be pretty exciting.
That's awesome stuff. Have you heard of PB Abate? Have you seen that?
Why? This sounds familiar to me.
Check it out on Instagram. There's a group called PB Abate. It's a veterans group, and it's a thing that they started in Montana. They created after Sergeant Abate from 3-5. Was killed in Afghanistan, so they named it in his honor. And it's like a place that they let people come, for free to just come, like, relax and maybe learn a new skill or just bring people together and stuff like that. And I just want to bring that up, man. Maybe you guys should contact them and maybe get something going together, because that's a growing organization also. And I think having someone on that can speak about cannabis as a medicine and could really help some of the people out that probably need that, rather than just swallowing a bunch of opioids, man, swallowing a bunch of pills, because that's just not good. We've seen that.
No, 100%, and that's a great thing, and that's like kind of what we're doing at Valor Brothers, where we just brought in an executive director and a CFO, and I'm taking a kind of step back and kind of let that thing run, but really want to build like a hub and spoke model with that, where we can join up with other great like 501c3s who doing things like that, or people who do like outdoor adventures and everything. I'm not going to try to replicate it. Let's just kind of see how we can partner and really help maximize our talent, so the veterans getting everything that they need.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be a lot easier too once it's either decriminalized or legalized, because I know it's cross state. You guys can't really do anything right now, right? None of your product can go across state.
You become a felon.
Yeah. So if they don't ever make it, like, is there a plan to possibly set up other cultivation sites in other states and stuff?
Yeah. That's what we're eyeing out Michigan next. Where George and Cody have a really good presence out there and done some things. So, we'll be out there with our adult use brand. That's where we'd like to do our third phase of our research. And, we're definitely we're open up to a lot of areas. I mean, we're checking some out. We want to make this into a national brand one day. So, as we can grow and as we can build more bandwidth, the more states we would like to get into. For sure, man.
Well, I think this is a perfect place to wrap it up, and then I'd like to set up another interview, and we'll get into some more of your history with the Raiders and stuff like that. I have enjoyed the pre-rolls. I got the Purple Kush. I'm gonna spark that up after we're done here and do some editing, do some video editing.
Love it.
If you'd like to go ahead and put out all your information, how people can get a hold of you and the other guys at HVGC.
Yeah, absolutely. Check us out on Instagram at HVG Company. You'll find our website at www.hvgcompany.com. And then check out ValorBrothersFoundation.org. If you want to make a donation or anything like that, like I said, it makes a big difference in a veteran's life. And just really appreciate and humble that you took the time to speak with me today. And I look forward to part 2.
Oh, yeah, man, for sure. And I'll make sure to put all those links in the show description also, so that those are there. And for those, listening, thanks for checking out the podcast. My Instagram is at @formeractionguys, at jkramergraphics, and my website's jkramergraphics.com. Pick up some sweet gear there. And again, Bryan, thanks for coming on, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right, brother. You have a great day.